Hey everyone and welcome. This is Nifty Crypto Stuff. I'm Corbin. This is Michael. About to do part two. You ready?
Yeah, I'm totally ready. This is part two of a three-part series that we're doing.
Yeah, yep. So last video we talked about government and money. This video is all about generational disruption, and this is crazy.
Yeah, so, when we look at the whole picture, we're talking about the pieces of this puzzle, right? So
Hmm.
the first one was government and money. This week, this video, we're talking about generational disruption, and then we're going to talk about the growth of technology. So this video is really all about a generation saying that we do not buy into your corporate, financial, or political system anymore
Hmm.
because it just doesn't work for us.
Yep.
And that's what the millennials were talking about.
Right. And I am one of those,
You
certainly.
are. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So let me start with a book called The Fourth Turning, right? So
Uh-huh.
I got to say that this is actually something that 3 years ago I had to come to grips with changing my entire premise for how I think,
Hmm.
right? And I had to understand these generational mindsets. And I think learning about the fourth turning, understand. So the premise of the book, The Fourth Turning, is that every 80 to 100 years, there's a generational disruption that levels the playing field for governmental and financial policies. And
Hmm.
it essentially rebuilds the entire financial system from the ground up. And the last time we saw this was with what we call the greatest generation.
Yeah.
These were the World War II, World War One. They saw World War One, World War II, the Great Depression. They saw disease, and they came in and they just had they said, we're done,
Hmm.
right? All this stuff in the past, we just are going, everything was destroyed. The entire world was destroyed. They had to rebuild Europe. They had to
Yeah.
rebuild, systems and financial systems, and had to figure out how to piece all these things together that they just totally wrecked and destroyed,
Right.
right? And so the last time we saw this was in the greatest generation. The
Yep.
people who benefited from that disruption back then the most were the baby boomers, and they were born in 1943 to 1964. I am born in 1965,
Yeah.
so I am a first year Gen Xer. So I
Yep.
understand the boomers a little
Hmm.
bit, and I understand the Xers a little bit, but I'm kind of caught in this in between. So
Right.
when were you born, Corbin?
It was 1990, so I am through and through a millennial.
You are
Yeah.
right in the middle of the millennials. So a lot of this that we talk about, because you and I have talked about this before, you just nod and say, "Oh wow, I couldn't put it into words,
Hmm.
but I get it. I feel it, right? I
Right.
understand it."
Yep.
And so basically what this says is it says, hey, the crisis generations or the fourth generation in every turning is a crisis generation. That is what the millennials are today. The
Yep.
same as the greatest generation was.
Right.
So the
I,
millennials have to deal. Good.
oh well, the way that I see it too is like I think the Geico commercial puts this perfectly, which is don't become your parents. And the problem is our parents being the Generation X or Boomers, right? For the millennials, is it worked awesome for the Boomers. Of course, that's the advice that they would pass down.
Right.
you know and so the Gen X tries to do it, and they maybe benefited, maybe didn't, but it 100% doesn't work for us.
Right. So your dad gave you all the same advice that me as a dad did. Go to college, get
Yeah.
a good job, make sure you have health care attached to your job,
Hmm.
right? Work your way up, earn money, save, put money into assets or the stock market or your 401k
Yep.
and stuff like that. But the problem is that you're not able to make the same kind of money in assets
Hmm.
that they are able to make, right?
Right.
So they're talking from, hey, when they were talking about compounding interest, hey, remember hey, let's open a savings account when you're young. And did your mom ever
Yeah.
open you a
Yeah.
Christmas
Yeah. Yeah.
account or something like that, right?
Right. And I think I was getting maybe 2% as a 8-year-old or whatever it
Right. And
was.
now
Right.
today you get 0.001%, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so
Compounding.
the reality is we're teaching the same principles, but they don't mean the same result.
Right.
And so we're not teaching our kids how to build wealth. We're teaching them how to do the same things that we did that worked for us but
Yep.
do not work under the new monetary system and the new governmental system. It just doesn't work anymore. And
Yeah.
by the way, this is not a government Republican Democrat thing. This is a there's a fiscal disruption that needs to happen in
Yeah.
order for the millennials to be able to succeed.
Right. The circumstances change. So, so what do we do now? Like what are we looking at now?
Yeah, so I think let me show you this chart. So this is
Mhm.
it's interesting because as a baby, an Xer slash boomer, right?
Yep.
I always think of these millennials as a lot of my other friends do,
Yeah.
right? Boomer friends, they think of millennials as these kids who just played video games all day and didn't want to go outside and play,
Children.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And that they were all given everything and they don't know anything and they're lazy. And I can put a whole bunch of words together to tell you what these millennials are. But here's what you don't hear: the millennials are the second largest generation today, and soon, within a few years, will be the largest generation that we have on
Yep.
planet Earth, right?
Hmm.
And so we have these millennials who just turned 40, Corbin.
Yeah.
Literally, the first millennial turned 40 January
Ancient.
1st of this year,
Yep.
right? We're not talking about 20-year-old kids who don't want to work. We're talking about 40-year-olds,
Hmm.
35-year-olds, right? 30-year-olds. These are the millennials.
Yep.
And what they know is they know the system doesn't work for me. I'm going to make my own way and do my own thing. And I'm going to decide what's important to me. And let me tell you what's not important to them: big houses, big assets,
Yep.
and the 9 to 5 job. These are not important to them. Tell me what is important to you.
Right. So, being with your friends and being in the community that you've chosen. And part of the problem though is the wages to the assets, like we talked about in the previous video, you just can't catch up. So why like we can't
So
even
why
be
try?
interested. If we
Right?
wanted them, we couldn't get them. And
Yep.
so there's no point. So we have to divert it to video games and things like that.
Right. But you build these things, right? And
Hmm.
you also say, hey, there's an alternative, because remember, the millennials are not financial people.
Nope.
They are not political people, right? You
Yep.
see some of them as activists and stuff on the left, and we'll say, oh, blah 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 blah, right? But
Yep.
here's what they are: they are really really smart. They
Hmm.
value they value their flexibility. They value travel. They value the ability with technology to work wherever I want. They value the fact that I have a community of people that I like to be around,
Yep.
right? And so these are all things that they value,
Hmm.
and it's not the same things that boomers valued,
Right.
right? And so as a result, you have this millennial generation, which are a bunch of developers and
Hmm.
mathematicians and really smart people who say, we know games. So we're going to build this entire financial system on things that they know: game theory,
Hmm.
right? On, hey, we're going to build this metaverse or this, blockchain world that
Yep.
is transparent, because we've never had anybody transparent, and we're not going to
Yep.
allow central authorities to rule what we can and cannot do. And we're
Right.
going to create this system that works for us the way that
Mhm.
we want it to be built. And we're going to
Yep.
talk about that next week,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yep.
But let me go into this, right? So there are some significant points in history that I
Mhm.
want to kind of talk about. So the first point in history is in 2002, Wall Street changed the benefit for corporate stock with past performance as opposed to future growth,
Yep.
right? So we rewarded companies for meeting earnings in the past. Hey, we're
Mhm.
going to tell you that we're going to make this much money, and then we're going to be judged on whether or not we make that much money in a quarter, right?
Right.
As opposed to, hey, we did this and we have a lot of future thinking, and we're going to be rewarded because we're forward thinking,
Mhm.
right? And so
Yep.
in 2002, when things were changed, it was changed based off of past performance, not changed off of what are you going to do in the future, right?
Right.
The second thing was this housing bailout, right? So we talked
Mhm.
about this in the last video in 2009, that
Yep.
benefited who? The banks, and it
The
benefited
boomers.
the boomers,
Yep.
right? And we're still playing the same game where we're trying to keep assets high because the boomer generation needs us to keep assets high,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Yep.
all we're doing by printing money and doing all these things. And the millennial generations do not benefit in that.
Right.
Like, your generation does not benefit in that. And you can go to the bank today, Corbin, and they're
Mhm.
going to say, well, what assets do you have? And you're going to say, I don't have any because it's difficult for me to get into it, right?
Right. Right. especially in the speed and ability that the boomers had,
That's
as
exactly
they were
right.
building the system.
Yeah,
So, right, and then that's where this Occupy Wall Street comes from, right? Where that was a protest
right.
against that,
There's a
and
protest against Wall Street in 2011 that said, "Hey, you guys are screwing us and you're not letting us play in your world, right?
Mhm.
And we're going to occupy you and we're going to have this sit in." And me as a boomer slash Xer, here's what
Yeah,
I thought of them. What a bunch of punks,
yep,
right? What a bunch of liberal punks, because I had this framework of politics.
hmm
And I think that that framework, I look back and say, it really wasn't about politics at all. And I don't even think that they knew that. It
right.
was about the fact that they're left out of a system of wealth.
Right. I think that, and I also at the time was I was not interested in Occupy Wall Street. For me, it wasn't, they were lazy kids, who wanted free handout stuff mad at wealthy people. Um, but that's just because I didn't really know what I was starting to begin to understand, which was the financial system, the way it is, there's something wrong, right? And I could
Does
sense that
not work
too.
for you.
Right, and that was the middle ground of these two, you talk a lot how this is not a political thing, and it's not, right?
Mm-mm.
We both knew. Those Occupy Wall Street kids were mostly, your Bernie bros, right? And so
Right.
but then I'm on the other side at the time and going, well, I also know that there's something wrong with the
That's right.
financial system, and we're speaking the same thing. We just don't know how to communicate and don't know how to put it into a visual or a tangible
Right.
thing.
And it gets put into this lobbyist or activist world, right? But
Mhm.
they don't understand the money aspect and they're all just trying to keep their own power.
Right.
Right. And so we end up using these and they're like, hey, we're done.
Yeah.
Then comes coronavirus,
Yep.
right, in 2020, which gives an opportunity for this generation to say, hey, total disruption. We poured a bunch of money into the system, and this is our opportunity to really make things different, right? But they were left out of all of those things. They couldn't go get money. The government bailed out all of the business owners with the small business bailouts and
Yep.
helping them, but they didn't help the little guys, right? They didn't help the people who are starting their restaurant, who are the millennials, right?
Mhm.
Starting small businesses. It really did not help small business. It helped corporate America. Even though they said it didn't, I'm a business owner, and it took me a lot to get a business loan that I
Yep.
was entitled to, that
Mhm.
had SBA written all over it. But
Yep.
instead, they gave it to these chain restaurants because of the way that they did their books, and they
Yep.
got millions and millions of dollars, and I got my 300,000. And oh, by the way, the amount of effort I had to put into getting those was
Yep.
absolutely crazy,
Right.
right? I had to give them my left cheek in order for them to give me any money,
Yep.
and prove it over and over and over again. And
Right.
so again, the dissatisfaction just grows even more,
Mhm.
right? And so now we have 2021 comes along, and this group of Reddit millennials sitting on this chain that nobody pays attention to,
Yep.
decides that, hey, there's something that is near and dear to our hearts, and it's called GameStop. We
Mhm.
grew up with GameStop. We love video games. You could have picked any other company and you could have done this exact same thing too. But they
Yep.
chose GameStop because this group said Wall Street is trashing GameStop and they're about to be out of business. And
Right.
even though we don't even use GameStop anymore, we grew up with GameStop.
Yep.
And we hate what Wall Street does all the time. They pick and choose who gets to succeed and who doesn't. And
Right.
so as a result, the Wall Street was saying we're going to short this stock and basically put it out of business, this company out of business, by
Yep.
just driving the price down, down, down. And
Mhm.
these guys at Wall Street or WeBets says, hey, we're going to go in,
Mhm.
and I think it was Wall Street Bets, but we're going to go
Yeah.
in and we're going to say, hey, let's just get on the horn and let's just start boosting
Yeah.
the price of the stock up and let's buy.
Right. And it was a protest in multiple ways because it was one, hey, we hate the financial system that you guys do. We see what you're about to do to this, and we're going to try and screw you on that. Right. So we're going to take your shorts and make you lose a bunch of money. And
Right.
then they were also taking it's something nostalgic, but it also represented the thing that boomers hated, which was go outside and play. Playing
That's right.
video games. And we said we love video games, and
Right.
so it was the perfect thing to do. you
it
know,
was it was absolutely amazing, and let me tell you, there were millionaires, millennial millionaires and Gen Z millionaires created on that one day.
right.
In one day, I
Hmm.
alone understood what they were doing, and
Yep.
I made probably $20,000 on that one day, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of people who probably lost money, but you
Hmm.
know what? In this generation, it's interesting. They are totally resilient. Like
Yeah.
they don't care. Like, hey, I
Right.
lost that money. I'll just make it
Yeah.
back somewhere else, right?
They're happier to have participated in it than to
It
have made the
it
money
was
or
a
lost it.
movement. That's
Yep.
right, it was a movement, and here's the other thing, is what you don't see is if you were part of that Reddit community, that there are people inside of Wall Street Bets,
Hmm.
right, who are actually giving people who lost money, money back. "Hey,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
made $2,000,000.
Hmm.
Here's $500,000
Right.
split up amongst all of you guys because you participated." I absolutely love that,
Yeah.
and so they gather around. They really understand each other, and they support one another in what they do. That's what this generation is about, not the selfishness of the boomer generation,
Yep.
right? And
Right.
so it's really interesting to see how the generations function and
Hmm.
how this millennial generation is about to change the rules, and it's going to basically screw boomers and Xers if they don't start to understand what's coming down the pike because they are going to become powerless. And
Right.
there's a
Right.
fight that's already happening politically, financially, but it's about to get ugly. And the
Hmm.
millennials know it. And they're just saying, your system is going to go down, and we have the tools now that we can do it.
Right. And the reason that we are taking it down is because we have been screwed by this existing system the entire time and given bad advice. And I don't, and not necessarily maliciously,
Yeah,
just just boomers and Gen Xers didn't understand that it was bad advice, right?
that's right.
And but we knew it was because we were like, hey, I'm trying this thing that you keep
I'm
telling me
trying.
to
I
do. And
went
it's
to college, right? What did that
yeah,
get me, right? That got
yep,
me a job that $35,000 a year and a lot of debt,
right.
right? I tried to save money and I can't. I'm
Hmm.
trying to buy a house and you're telling me just save up for a down payment, but I can't save enough fast enough for a down payment to buy a house. Then I go to the bank and they ask me, "What do you have?" And I'm
Yep.
like, "I have nothing." And then
Hmm.
the job that I have doesn't pay me enough for them to give me a house that I really would probably want to live in. So screw this. I don't
Yep.
need a big house.
Right.
I'm going to travel. I'm going to value my free time and I'm going to do gig work. I'm not
Yep.
going to be tied to any company at all.
Right. And how did we solve that?
Yeah. So here's the beauty of it, that this is all solved in technology.
Right.
And what boomers don't understand is that our world and the millennials deal off of something called network effect and technology. I
Right.
think we're done with seeing millennials working and Gen Zs working in a 9 to 5 world. Why
Yep.
do I need to go work at McDonald's or Culver's when I can spend Friday night playing a video game and making $500 in two
Right.
hours playing a video game on Twitch? Or why do I need to do that when I can go drive an Uber after an Orlando Magic game and I
Hmm.
can make $150 working 2 hours driving an Uber? Why do
Right.
I need to go to Culver's and make that money? Right.
Right. And
So
that
it totally
technology
changes
being
it.
built benefits the next two generations as well. Right. And so now they
Mhm.
can see the things that we're doing and go, oh, that looks way better.
That's
Right.
right. And it's
And s-
going to see that the growth of technology is the savior and the avenue by which the millennials are going to say we're building a new financial system.
right.
And oh, by the way, a voting system that you are not going to be able to tamper with because
Right.
that's what the blockchain does.
Yep. And so the technology, that's going to be in our last part, our next video, right?
Mhm.
So we will save that for that. Thank you for joining us on this one. Really appreciate you guys watching. If you can, give us a like, follow, and subscribe. Share it with somebody that you think could listen to this as well.